Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We provide fan-oriented and analytic discussions on a variety of animated shows, movies, and anime. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm joined by Sam Quattro.
Hello.
Sam and I will be discussing the 2015 stop-motion animated film by director Charlie Kaufman and co-director Duke Johnson, Anomalisa. This is a much different offering than we usually discuss on the podcast, but I want to discuss all the prominent animated, in quotes, films from this year. This is first warning label. This is definitely a movie that is not appropriate for younger audiences. Most of the content on our podcast is, but please do not watch this movie or listen to this podcast.
Does this mean this podcast is going to be rated R?
This is rated R podcast, yeah, for sure.
Can we curse?
Yes, absolutely. After this warning. Yeah, you haven't been on one of these.
Have we have one?
Me and Delaney did Rick and Morty and City, which were adult shows. Yeah. Another thing is that if you have not yet seen Anomalisa, I will tell you when spoilers start. I think people are very unfamiliar with this movie, so there will be a time in the description as well. But for now, until I say spoilers start here, you're fine. And I am very strict with spoilers, so I
have to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah. Okay. So this Anomalisa, it's probably gonna be nominated for Best Animated Feature. It's in the third most popular movie in critics' top 10 lists this year. So
maybe for Best Script too.
Yeah, I think it could be
because it's Charlie Kaufman. So
yeah, which people consider him like a great writer. Yeah. This is before if it's going to be nominated for script, the Academy is going to do the incredibly dumb thing where him adapting his own play is going to make it a best adapted screenplay, which is it's the dumb thing. Yeah.
But it was a play before.
It was like a really small play, yeah. And then I don't really understand in what capacity it was a play. At the very least, he originally wrote it to be a play, and we'll discuss details of that for one specific scene. So Anomalisa. No, that's not supposed to be a word. That is a real thing, and you will figure out why if you watch the movie. Okay, so I'm not familiar with Charlie Kaufman's works at all, actually. Sam, you are slightly.
Slightly.
Yeah.
Well,
have you seen any of his directed films?
I don't think I've seen. Let's see what he's directed.
Synecdoche, New York. He just directed
this and Synecdoche, New York. I haven't seen Synecdoche.
Being John Malkovich, I have not seen that either. So
I've seen some of that adaptation, and Eternal Sunshine is my favorite movie. So
this is Eternal Sunshine Sam loves. So Sam, you literally just watched this. What are your initial thoughts on Anomalisa, even if you haven't necessarily? It's a really weird movie, so it's not like we're gonna have our thoughts completely down yet. But what are you thinking right now about it?
So I didn't really like it until the halfway mark, and then after that I was like, it was still like meh. Like the ending was like, eh. I mean, it plays on a lot of tropes that I don't really like, and that I think are kind of overdone. And like it uses them straight as opposed to like subverting them. Or I guess maybe it does subvert them, I'm not sure. We'll get into it.
So it's like everything in this movie is a subversion, so it's really hard to tell. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why it's like considered one of the best movies of the year and why it's like on all the critics like lists and stuff. But for me, like maybe it's not particularly my cup of tea, given like the characters and like who they are and whatnot.
Yeah. Is one of the only problems I had with this film. I really, really love Anomalisa. I think that it's really cerebral. I think it's really it's kind of like dark and self-aware of everyday life in ways that other films or media are not. And I feel like that's probably what Charlie Kaufman is known for. Although again, I have not seen his other works. I will definitely watch them now because I loved this. The only problem I had is that it's very much a male perspective.
Yeah, that was really my problem.
Yeah, and I can see that. There's one sequence in the film that I'll talk about later, which I was not a fan of. And other than that, the beginning, it's not like good, and it's not like you're going to be happy watching it, but it's just very aware of how it just I could see people calling this like pseudo intelligent, like, and that's a good thing that people would call it that because it's like that aware of how things actually work.
Though?
It's like if people so I'm saying like I'm saying it's aware of how things actually work, and then people might respond to that by like, oh, that's like pseudo intelligent nonsense, right?
Yeah.
And like if people would say that, then that's a good thing. That was a dumb point to make, but yeah, there's one really interesting mechanic that the film uses, which we'll talk about after spoilers, and um, just everything really comes together pretty well at the end. Uh, the stop motion is really interesting to talk about. Basically, all the characters in this are Barbie doll sized puppets printed out by a 3D printer. And then, like, literally, it's just stop motion. Like, they move a little bit and they take a picture and they move and they take a picture. And that's the entire movie, which is kind of crazy that I think that for this movie, it's harder to tell that that's what's going on than other stop motion that I've seen. Like, you kind of, true or false, Sam, you like kind of just it didn't like color your viewing experience that these were puppets and it was stop motion. Like did you constantly think that as you were watching?
Not really. I mean, there were parts where sort of they played with that a little bit.
There, yeah,
Like,
one thing for in particular, yeah.
yeah, but like honest, the whole time I was thinking, well, this could have really easily been done in live action. I'm not sure why it's stop motion instead of like. I mean, maybe they just want to like play with the medium and like see what they could do with it, which is always like welcome. But it could have easily been done in live action. Like really, like there's nothing like spectacular like effects wise that would have caused it to be like less
Yeah.
painful.
Let me read to you. I'm going to be quoting several times for an interview Charlie Kaufman and Duke Johnson did for NPR's Fresh Air on why Charlie Kaufman on why this is needed to be stop motion. The story Kaufman said, "We think it allows people to focus and pay attention to things that are mundane in a way that they might not be able to in live action. You know that everything you see has been calculated and choreographed. There's no accident. If he drums his finger against his thigh, that was a choice we made as filmmakers, and it becomes kind of fascinating because of that." So my interpretation is like this film is just very much about the just like the absurdities and the terribleness of the mundane aspects of everyday life, and like they are in complete control of that with stop motion.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
that's a very art thing.
yeah, I think this film. I mean, you're the art person. This film seems very much more like a work. I mean, all movies, I guess, are works of art to a certain extent, but this seems more work of artish than a
Yeah,
typical
especially
narrative,
with like the choices that were made. Yeah, it was definitely more a quote unquote a work of art, like
as opposed to
historical.
like a straight narrative piece.
Yeah,
And it's one where the medium comes into play and like the storytelling blend kind of together to serve the overall tone. It's quite. I think it's quite an experience. I would recommend this. Of course, it's in very adult. If you if the type of kind of the playing on getting into the everyday aspects of life and that type of thing, if that kind of concepts appeal to you, I would recommend this movie. I think it's worth checking out, even if you're skeptical, because just how prominent it is, and it's very much, as we're an animation podcast, this is not the type of work that comes along very often in U.S. animation, so it's very
yeah.
important, I think, to cover it, and we'll talk about how I hope that this opens up adult animation for filmmaking here in the United States, which it is very much not a thing before this. So, also, it's only 90 minutes. Playing very limitedly around the U.S. I think it's going to expand soon. So,
I was gonna say I feel like it might have worked better as a short, but then again, that takes away from like the quiet moments and like
originally it was planned for like 40, 50 minutes, and they
yeah,
just
like I feel like it might have worked better that
and
way,
then
but
they figured out that they it was this was also kickstarted.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, I was just reading that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of interesting stuff about this production, and they're again originally a play. Okay, so spoilers start here. Let me note the time down so that we
Oof.
can. But yeah, so I would, and again, if you're considering, there's people who like spoiling themselves, and there's people who are like, oh,
So
whatever,
Sam.
Sam. But also, there's a lot of people who are just like, oh, listen to the spoiler section, whatever. I would really not recommend that for this movie. It's very much like an experience to view, and like I would not color that with knowing what happens. Okay.
Also, I just noticed that Charlie Kaufman, like pretty much all of his movies except for Eternal Sunshine, are about beleaguered creative types.
Hmm.
like directors and authors and puppeteers and
Do
stuff.
you think that that describes the main character of this movie?
He is a beleaguered he wrote a book.
Yeah,
So
but like it's
he is
interesting. Okay, we're
beleaguered.
in spoilers now. So this main character, Michael Stone, he's like it's so weird. He's a customer service expert. What is
Yeah,
his
what is that?
he's the respected author of How May I Help You Help Them. It's like we kind of slowly learn what he's doing there, and it like turns out that he's actually famous in a very narrow circle, right?
Yeah,
Among
to the customer service
the
people.
customer service industry. He's like, yeah.
I've
So
never heard of
like,
him.
what do you think of that concept? It's such a weird thing to make him
I mean, like that's probably a thing. That's somebody's job out there to like write this sort of book. So
to like try to improve like efficiency in the customer service industry. To me, the thing that his job did was like it changed my perspective on his prominence. I mean, I think this is intentional. It's like in the beginning of the movie, he seems very much an unimportant everyday man, and he's British. We learn, and that's like okay, but he just seems he's on a business trip. He's staying. I guess in a fancy hotel, but it's like he seems incredibly unimportant. And then we actually kind of learn that he's like an author and he's like at least in a small circle kind of a big deal, and I feel like that kind of changes your perspective on him a little bit, but at the same time it's already been established how all these mundane aspects of life apply to him, so like I feel like that was very intentional to like make us like relate to him on a not that he's a big deal anyway once we learn that, but I do think it's intentional that we're playing with the perspective on his importance like in
yeah,
society.
yeah. Hmm.
It's interesting. I don't think this character isn't much, and I think that's on purpose. I mean, the most prominent aspect of him is the stuff with everyone's voices, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's so okay. I want to talk about this. This is the most interesting part of the film, right? Is it's I didn't like you when you're watching, you realize at some point that everyone's voices except for Michael's are the same. And it's for me, I didn't realize this until
Yeah, I didn't realize it till the hotel.
I didn't realize it till the busboy in the hotel because I'm like, oh, he should have a teenage voice, but then he just sounds like the cab driver and sounds like the concierge, right? It's just it's everyone's voices are the same until we meet Lisa, of course, and then later we learn that
Lisa's voice is just the same.
Lisa's voice changed. That's like the climax of the film for me in terms of like, wow, this is really awesome when Lisa's voice is as they're talking is changing back into Tom Noonan's voice, who voices everyone. David Thewlis voicing Michael Stone and Jennifer Jason
Jennifer
Leigh,
Jason.
who I just saw in Hateful Eight voicing.
Oh, it's Lupin.
It's Lupin.
Yeah, that's the guy's voice. Remus Lupin.
Oh yeah, yeah, the main character, yeah, from Harry Potter. So yeah, just this concept is before we talk about the mental illness aspect of what's happening here, on its own, as because I didn't. It's not like I knew about Fregoli delusion as I was watching this. I saw this after.
Yeah, I didn't know either
Yeah,
until you
so
linked me to the article.
that was not me being smart. I read it on Wikipedia. So like even ignoring any professionally because and he does in the movie say I think I have I don't know what the phrasing he uses,
Psychological
psychological
problems.
problems, yeah. So even without the knowing the specifics of that, just I was just very fascinated by how this device of everyone's voice being the same relates to what's relates to this character's mental state, and it's just very striking in how it plays with Lisa because of course then he starts treating Lisa like she's like really special. I mean, we had his ex who I don't remember his name, that character's
Yeah,
name, but
I don't remember.
like
Uh,
and he like initially treats her like she's special.
Bella. Bella.
Bella, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, and then but then eventually it just devolves and then we get to Lisa, and I don't know, just let's before we get into Lisa, which is it's a whole another thing. What did you think of this device and how it played out eventually with the climax of the film?
So I really wasn't keeping the mental illness part like that wasn't in my mind at all while I was watching. It's like even like after he mentioned, oh, I might have psychological problems, I thought, well, you're just being over dramatic. Um, I thought like it was like quote unquote the like how I mentioned earlier, it's one of like the creative choices they made to make it like artsy.
Mm.
Since that's like an artsy thing that somebody would do.
Which even with that
Um,
in play, it still is kind of an artsy choice, you know. So
yeah, I mean, I like it's not like bad or anything. It's a very artsy choice, and you know it works sometimes. Um, I don't know, like in conjunction with the mental stuff. Like now that I'm thinking about it, it makes me sort of like the character a little bit more. I mean, not like him a little bit more, but more like understand him and not just see him as like a beleaguered uh
hmm
cynic who
yeah,
just hates everybody. So
he's very unsympathetic unless you take this into play. I agree. So let's talk about Fregally delusion, which is very intentionally evoked by the movie because that's the name of the hotel, and his that was his Charlie Kaufman's pen name when he wrote the play, Francis Fregally. So he's intentionally evoking this disorder. It is a rare disorder in which a person holds a delusional belief that different people are in fact a single person who changes appearances in disguise. So it's like everyone. Here's the thing. I don't know if we should be in. I don't want to talk about this movie in terms of like this is a movie about a guy with a mental illness because I don't think that's what it's trying to present as much. And I think it's hard. It's a little hard to talk about that because this is not something. This is not like an illness that would like dominate things. Like some things can be more subtly manifested in people, but it's not like he has trouble in the movie like determining that different people are different people. He's
yeah,
very he knows that people are different. So, and to a certain extent, it's not like he fully has what it's talking about here, but it's more of just Fregally delusion in the sense that everyone is just completely unremarkable to him, and that they just all blend together in his mind, which may or may not be like a I assume it is like part of that umbrella of delusion. He definitely does seem. I mean, we get the nightmare scene in the with the hotel manager, right?
yeah, yeah,
Which is like which is more of a clear manifestation of this. But in terms of the scenes that are not dreams, it's just like everyone's just completely unremarkable to him, and that's manifested with the voices.
yeah. And I thought that that's something that was just like, like of course. And then we have the manic pixie dream girl Lisa come in.
Okay, let's talk about Lisa. So, what did you think of this character, Lisa?
I liked her. I mean, I really did like her. I thought that she was like, yeah, she was nice. She like girls want to have fun, and that's one of my favorite songs. She likes scrambled eggs. I like scrambled eggs. Um, I don't know. It's interesting that like I guess it's like another interesting like quote unquote play on like a subversion that this almost this like I don't know if you'd say subjectively or objectively. Subjectively to me, somebody who is like kind of unremarkable herself will be considered
Mm-hmm.
super remarkable by Michael. But
So yeah, so let me tell you what I think the movie's doing with Lisa, which is what you just said. I think she's supposed to be the most unremarkable, boring person in the entire world. So it's like it's kind of funny you said that's like one of your favorite songs, "Girls Just Want to Have Them," but then she's like,
I love that
then
song.
she quotes the line, just want to be in the sun." Oh, I feel that so much. Like, oh my god, you're the worst. That's what the movie was doing. It's like really that's the thing you find meaning in that incredibly unintelligent line.
Wanna be the one who
And
walks.
even if that song is like the movie's taking up the viewpoint that that song is just some dumb song, right? And it's like okay,
I like the
and
song.
it's like well,
I'm sorry, Charlie Kaufman, but I like it.
I think that's clearly what the movie's saying. And she sings it in Italian, and like somehow he's interested in that, and he's like, "I love my eggs scrambled." Like, oh my goodness, this is this is absurd.
Too.
That's kind of what it's just everything was incredibly boring about her, and yet he was finding her so fascinating, and that was just the very striking element of the scene. Uh, but as unremarkable as Michael is, just this Lisa character is just like purposely one of the least interesting people ever, right? And what do we think of this anomaly thing? And then him calling her Anomalisa, which titles the film.
I kind of cringe. I was like, oh, that's the word. This is the name of the movie. Ugh.
It's
Ugh.
it's just their interactions are very cringeworthy. So this is the my least favorite part of the film is everything from when they enter the hotel room or when they meet till after they finish having an incredibly long sex scene. So
Yeah, that was. Dylan was like saying, Sam, it's coming up. I was like, no. And
It's
then it happened. I was like, oh.
Let me read Charlie Kaufman on the sex scene from the same NPR interview. So Kaufman says, "We were aware going into this of Team America and the idea of the puppet sex being funny. And certainly this scene got a lot of attention. It's being written about a lot. So people are interested in this idea of puppets having sex. But our goal was to follow Michael and Lisa from the point that they enter the hotel room to the point where the lights go out and the scene is over as one continuous thing and not betray them by making a joke out of this. So it really was a matter of being very hyper aware of what each of them was thinking at each moment leading up to the scene and through that scene. It all had to be choreographed with the intent of being true, that if there is humor in the scene, it comes out of the moments between them that are organic to the characters, the awkwardness of being with someone for the first time."
Also, doesn't need a condom. Doesn't pull out.
That wasn't important. I mean,
That's important to me.
Yeah, I mean, it should be important, but it wasn't important in the context of the movie.
It's important to me. You know how I like to nitpick things.
Um, so yeah, I think the scene was just very long, very uncomfortable, especially the puppets having sex was just, which is on purpose, but I still didn't enjoy it. Interestingly, I've read that in the play, this is those these actors, David Thewlis and Jennifer Jason Leigh, just like on opposite sides of the stage, like moaning at each other. So that's how they're going to manifest this in the play.
See, I like that better.
Yeah, I do like that better too. I mean, both of them are striking, like puppet sex and like that. But uh, yeah, what do you think of that? This entire sequence, like to me. Okay, so here's my thing. So that scene, like Michael, the main character, got lost in that scene for me. So I think there's a clear vision. It's like he just became like dumb and unrelatable. So we had the beginning Michael when he's just frustrated by like everything the cab drivers say
Yeah, like,
and just the mundane stuff of all life, and like him being like calling his ex up and like all of that to me is just relatable to a certain extent, you know. But then at the end of the movie he's dealing with he's like, okay, back to the realities of, you know, I guess I'm going back to whatever his wife's name was and
back
stuff
to
like
my
that.
wife, Donna.
Donna, yeah.
Yeah.
And his son, which he doesn't seem to care about at all. That's brutal.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
sucks.
that was
Like, he brought him like a sex doll.
that was just rough. Yeah, like seriously, that very rarely do you see just a picture. He like didn't seem to care about his son like at all, and he even says
He's
that
a
to Lisa.
dick. Ugh.
Yeah, like so like, but then in the middle we have this scene where he just seems really cool. And it was this perspective shift that I was talking about, and it's because we found someone even more unremarkable than him and Lisa, and she is just very buying all this crap that he says. Um, I don't know. I didn't find much. I understand what it's doing. It was
Yeah.
also just very long.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Like, I thought after that it was gonna, like, go somewhere more interesting. I guess, like, the speech scene was,
Yeah. So I
where
mean,
everything kind of came together.
we had a few scenes at the end after the puppet sex scene where like things are very prominent. We have the dream sequence, which I thought was very good. We have them eating and her voice distorts into Tom Noonan's voice, and then we have the dream sequence, and we have him at home at the end. So there's a lot of kind of climax / falling action. I don't know what the climax of this film would be, but it's so let's talk about all four of those, I guess. So the dream sequence. What did we think? The first thing is that the the first thing that stands out to me is like the giantness of the hotel manager's office.
Yeah. I was like, what is, like, is this a dream? It was a dream.
Yeah, like what do we think of this as a device? I don't know what it's specifically trying to do.
I don't like the size of the room. I don't know. I couldn't.
That seemed more like an artsy choice to me than a lot of.
I mean, I'd have to like go back and analyze it.
Yeah, it was a little. There's a lot going on in that dream sequence, so it's a little bit hard to. I mean, it's still the whole movie is slow paced, right? But it's a lot to take in, and then just him. That's when he seems the most delusional, right? Is during
Yeah,
that, but it is just a dream, so maybe it's what's the why is he dreaming about being more delusional than he seems to be in real life?
I don't know.
Yeah, this is a little tough. Yeah, I'm not sure how that factors in.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. That's hmm. Maybe his like subconscious mind knows more than his conscious mind,
Yeah,
or like suspects more.
I honestly don't know what he's supposed to say. What the point of that is? This is not a movie where it's very things are very obvious walking out of the theater or whatever, and yeah, so we have that sequence, and then he's like, everyone. What was the conclusion of that? It's been a few hours since I've seen this now. It's everyone's in love with me, right? Was that it?
Yeah, where everybody's like the same person, and since his wife is in that everybody's like in love with him.
Was
Uh,
was his wife related to that dream sequence?
no, but like they're all voiced by the same guy, so I have to
Yeah, yeah,
assume
yeah. Well, yeah, that's true.
that's
Well, when
what
everyone's
that
the same
meant.
voice, there's a lot of different interpretations. Yes, we had that scene. We had the scene with them eating breakfast, when Lisa's voice begins to distort into the other one. More unremarkable Lisa stuff, and then you can see him just getting like less enthusiastic, right? He's
Yeah,
like, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna marry you, and then it's like by the end, it's like no.
I wonder why that happens. Like, but I guess the speech sort of like explains it a little bit.
So you talk about the speech. What did you take away from his speech at the conference?
That everybody is an individual and has their own lives, and everybody deserves to be loved, no matter how unremarkable they are.
Do you think that was the point, or do you think that was what he was saying?
No, that's what I got from it.
Okay. What do you think he was saying? What do you like? He's because he's like saying actual things,
He's
and then he
saying,
was saying other like is like what he was like thinking, right?
yeah, he was like spewing out BS because it's like the customer service shit.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know. I guess it was sort of related to what he was like his existential crisis on the stage. It was like, what was he saying? Like he felt lost and like how he didn't have anybody, and everybody is like the same person, but
Yeah.
also he put the setting in the play. Like I feel like what the setting is like 2005, since he calls the president a war criminal, Bush.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. He
Also
did.
like the 10 years ago thing from Becca's letter in the beginning. Anyway,
Yeah. Uh, it's yeah. Let's talk about his loneliness, I guess, right? Because that was the a lot of the beginning of the film, on him calling up his ex, and then at the end, he's like that's why he latches on to Lisa so much. But she, so how does his loneliness relate to like everyone being the same and like him not actually caring about anyone?
I don't
It's kind
know.
of a
Like,
shitty dynamic. Like that's a terrible reality to live in, where you're just cripplingly lonely, but at the same time can't distinguish someone and care about them.
wow, that kind of Dylan, you just described how I feel all the time.
I mean, maybe there's a lot of this guy in you or all of us. I don't know. That's what this guy's going through in the film. Um, like he obviously needs some sort of like companionship or some people in his life, but everyone just is. He just doesn't care about anyone.
Yeah, and it's just like I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what the big like metaphor is here, but
How okay? So how about his ex in that scene at the hotel bar? Because it did seem like he actually cared about her. Um,
yeah,
but looking back, I interpret it maybe more as that was him trying to recapture past feelings that he had, like similar to the one night he spent with Lisa before she like moved back into the gray.
so you're saying that what's your face? Bella wasn't always like the same voice person like she used to have.
I think it probably at one point she had a different voice, much like yeah, her distinguished
Much like
voice.
maybe everybody all
But
had
but
different
looking back,
voices.
yeah, at the time I thought he cared about her, but looking back, she had the same voice, so it wasn't so much that he saw her and instantly the connection came back. I think he was just trying to remember the connection that they had initially,
Yeah. Hmm.
which is yeah, I think that scene does play differently depending on like when if it's we're watching for the first time or looking back on it. Um, we have yeah, and the scene her yeah the breakfast scene with her, and then the speech, her him at home with the wife, and he throws a surprise party, and there he like okay, this is another manifestation of the actual Fregley. Like he's like who are these people, right?
Yeah.
Which apparently it's all his friends and stuff, but he just like he seems to like genuinely not know who they are.
Hmm. Yeah, it does.
What is I remember I'm trying to remember the specifics of one interaction with his wife, like when he got back. He says, so, well, at one point she's like, "Dude, I don't want you to leave us. And he's like, where would I go? Right.
Yeah, yeah.
But what about I don't know. They have some exchange back and forth. I don't remember. But
I don't know, I'm trying to figure out what you're talking about.
yeah.
But yeah, I know like he says that, and it's like she's like, well, burr, 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 and then she
Yeah.
runs
Like
off.
what do any of us do with that? That was her response to it.
Yeah, like who are any of us?
Okay,
Like,
yeah, yeah. What does he say to prompt that?
well, like who are all these people?
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know any of them? Well, who are you? It's like, wow, food for thought.
Yeah, well, that's there's more of some of the thesis statements revolving his delusions, right? Um, what do we think of his relation to the wife and the kid? We talked about the kid already and how that sucks, but
This really reminds me of Lost in Translation. Have you ever seen that, Dylan?
I have not. But yeah,
It's honestly it's pretty much the same movie. Um,
my perception of that movie is not edgy like this movie.
no, it's not stop motion. Basically, Lost in Translation is about this guy played by Bill Murray. He's like an actor guy, and he feels disillusioned with everybody, his wife, etc. But then he meets Scarlett Johansson, and she's like his manic pixie dream girl, and then they like have like something. It's not really like a relationship. I don't know what it
No
was.
spoiling the end.
I'm not. Um,
Obviously, yeah. So
Also, it's set in a hotel primarily, so
interesting.
it's that. But it feels a lot like the same movie, like a beleaguered old guy who is in some sort of field uh, that he gained recognition for. People like recognize him. Uh, can't relate to anybody, but then somebody rolls or some girl like comes and suddenly he relates to her or thinks that she's like lovely and fantastic and stuff. But is she really? Hmm.
So okay, I don't know how that movie ends, but I feel like
I don't
this
remember.
movie functions as a subversion of that type of Manny Pixic dream girl because um it's like yeah, at first she's like that to him, but the reality is she very quickly fades, just like everyone else in his life.
That's sort of the thing about Eternal Sunshine too.
Yeah, I think this is regardless of that movie specific. Yo, about Returnal Sunshine. Yeah, um, I think this is trying to subvert like any sort of tropes of one person having a profound effect on another because it's like no one can really change the how life is.
Well,
That's whatever life is.
that makes me really sad.
Well, this is a sad movie. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Let's talk about the aspects of how the beginning of this movie and throughout plays with like the mundane aspects of life. We have the cab driver talking about how it's like things to do in Cincinnati. This movie's set in Cincinnati for some reason. It's like the most, which is I think is supposed to be the most unremarkable city. But yeah,
The zoo was zoo sized.
the zoo is zoo sized. Yeah,
Try the chili.
yeah. And then that comes back on a billboard later, and then it's just like on a magazine or something. There's like the aspect of him trying to call for customer service, and like there's like five possible buttons that it could be, or like room service
Yeah,
on
like,
the phone.
and I was like, is this a fever dream?
No, but it's like no, that's just how life is. There's five buttons, and like they all, who knows which
They
one
all
is real? They all might
they
do
all
the
did
same
the
thing.
same
Yeah.
thing.
What can you remember any other ones that stand out about that like that type of thing? There's like his interactions with the bellhop and him like the bell. I don't know if that. Yeah, and
Yeah,
him.
him like saying his name like over and
Yeah,
over.
and him just like just needlessly talking. Like I was like, oh my god, shit.
Yeah, there was like a lot of like needless talking. I was like, oh.
And he just doesn't care about any of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of like made me almost want to not watch the movie.
Why?
All this just needless talk. Like I
What's
get
the point though? It's supposed to be.
again, like that's like yeah, that's the part of the point. Blah blah blah. But that kind of stuff just doesn't engage me. And like
Well, I think there is a legitimate thing. It's like this movie is somewhat uncomfortable to watch for most of it.
I don't
Um,
want to say uncomfortable. I was just like,
what I think those are the main ones I can think of. How do we think of this part of the film commenting on just typical life?
I mean, I don't. That's something I think Charlie Kaufman is good at. Like he does it like in a surreal way all the time. Um, I don't know. I'm just like the perspective, like who the character is. He's a white male and he's old. That just sort of like I don't know.
So okay, let's talk about that because this is a perspective on the film you probably won't find anywhere else that we would talk about it from. Like we have more of a progressive, socially perspective on works that we discuss on this podcast. That
Millennials.
like we're then the like 50-year-old white guy reviewers. Then you'll see reviewing this movie, right? So this
I felt
movie.
the same way when I was watching Blue is the Warmest Color, but you go on with
Okay,
the reviewers with that.
so like I think from the perspective, and admittedly, I am able to view most things from this uh, uninteresting white male perspective. I mean, I am that, but like it's I watch things from a like a progressive critical lens, but I am able to fade like and turn that off, which is I don't know whether that's a good thing or whatever. But I think this movie is really edgy and kind of it's
Edgy.
like edgy, and I know that that word is that doesn't have a positive connotation, but like it's like really interesting and cerebral and just like tears apart the typical life. But I feel like you could argue that all of this is from a very just a privileged, like just a very like someone who is able to have this be the hardest aspect of their life. These small things, like the small inconveniences, people talking too much, to the I can't relate to like I can't find someone who
Yeah.
is really for me. All of this is just such a very white
Yeah, I feel
male
like it's yeah,
perspective,
I feel like it's really overdone.
and well, so it's there's a mental illness aspect to this, but like also
But first viewing I didn't.
you don't necessarily watch it like that, right? So
Yeah.
it's like so there's the question of is this movie like about like oh like is this movie about like privilege problems and stuff like that? And like is this just Charlie Kaufman bitching about things that people who aren't privileged would love for these things to be their biggest problems in life?
Maybe I don't know. Like this kind of makes me want to go back and watch Eternal Sunshine to see like how I would see it now after watching this and maybe see if I see the same patterns and like is this something that Charlie Kaufman is this like his thing just bitching about?
What it's like Michael Stone, like the main character. Do you like could you like relate to him for the majority of the film?
While I was watching it, no, not really.
What is
He
it?
just
What is it about him that's like unrelatable for you?
he just seemed like a dick. Not to say I'm not a dick, but like I don't know, he just seemed like an asshole and like like I don't know, like I could relate to like him not relating to other people to an extent,
Yeah,
but to him, he just like I said, like the magic word I keep saying tonight, he just seems really like beleaguered, like oh, get out of my face, like
he just
like
he just
he seems like a curmudgeon.
so like I agree. Not relating to people, I understand that, and like the viewing it from a mental illness perspective is relatable to you. But it's the aspects of him which are just like just seem like oh these are like rich person problems. Him walking into
Yeah,
like this
yeah,
fancy hotel and like oh this is so inconvenient. I have to figure out which button to push, and then he's just constantly ordering cocktails throughout the movie. Um, he's constantly manipulating whichever women he runs into to try to fulfill his sense of lack of intimacy. He's cheating on his wife. He's like, I mean, this is when no one's arguing this is a good person, but the problem could potentially be his problems are just like unrelatable to people who actually have struggles in their everyday life.
yeah,
These are the struggles of the person who doesn't have to struggle.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I
These are the
guess.
struggles of someone who's never been discriminated against and stuff like that, right? Like, and it's like if you present it from a privileged perspective, then it's going to be unrelatable to a lot of people.
I just feel like that perspective is just so overdone, and like I've seen it so many times. Like it's all that you see,
Which
and
perspective?
like the again like beleaguered privileged male who just like his only problem in life is this
Hmm.
and nothing
This
else.
to me seems much more because of like the mental aspect to it. It seems not even it seems much different than the most of the things you're talking about. Mental illness, but also just like how his brain is like struggling to cope with like the world around them. Like I feel like even first perspective, there's a big mental element to it. Um, that even if you don't view it with a specific mental illness lens, that it just seems it distinguishes it from a lot of the other I can't find I have intimacy problems type movies.
I don't know. I just like just I wish that there was something different there, but no, it's not my movie, so I can't change it.
I mean, yeah, yeah, but like, so for me, like, as much as there's a few problems in terms of perspective, like I said, I am kind of able to blend into that, but also find a lot of validity and truth to the truth, like that, whatever, using that word, but like to the mental side of his character and what he's going through. And that's the main part of the film, I think, and that really leads me to liking it a lot overall. It just feels so. It feels a lot different. It feels a lot okay. So I'm gonna one of the interesting things to come out of this is probably gonna it's either this or Inside Out for best animated feature at the Oscars, and like who cares like who wins that? It's no relevance to the real world. But I feel like that is kind of interesting comparing this movie to Inside Out because which I don't know if you've seen yet. Yeah, you saw that. So like
Yeah.
to me, my biggest criticism of Inside Out was that it was like it was like mental ill. It was like an introduction to mental illness for people who do not have. Like that's what it almost seemed like to me. It's like, oh, this is how people are depressed in the most basic sense of the word. Was like a lot of that movie to me. And it's like here's how emotions work if you look like for 5 seconds beyond the surface of society. And to me, that movie just felt very surface level. And compare it to this movie, where I feel like we're actually getting into a lot of real psychological stuff that happens and things I can relate to a lot more than just like here's how depression happens and it involves sadness, right?
Yeah.
Here's sadness and happiness. So like I feel like this is a really interesting contrast on two movies. Obviously, one's for kids and one's for adults. So or like intended audience, you know.
For me, I feel like film is just like I just don't go to film anymore when I want to see that sort of representation. Like there are hardly any films that talk about it, let alone ones that like get it to where I believe it, you know? Or to where I think it's like a quote unquote fair representation of like any sort of mental illness. Just speaking from my perspective personally. So I it's just like even like with indie films, like you still have to deal with like studios and like higher ups and like it just gets processed and processed. And eventually the final product comes out as something like a bastardization of maybe what it should have been or what people wanted it to be. So
Well, to me, that's like Inside Out. It's like it's not like any sort of like interesting points about mental illness. Like if you are someone who has anything on the mental illness spectrum, Inside Out, I feel like is unless you're just well, if people watch that and they're like, oh, I've never seen actual like big budget things talk about this before. So it's like interesting from that perspective, but it just doesn't broach new grounds. And I feel like to me, this is like one of the few films that like gets past what you're talking about. It's like make actual points about people's minds and like the realities of most people don't function normally like that, and just how people how to try to even if it's from this like really unsympathetic privileged guy, like how you try to get past this and deal with your life around you and the realities of what it causes.
yeah, I don't
Uh,
know.
and I feel like this movie is only able to do that really because it's specifically Charlie Kaufman. Like I feel like almost no one else would be able to do that, and because it was kickstarted.
Yeah, that was what I
Yeah,
was about to say.
yeah. Well, I mean, it did have studio funding, but it was only after like it got proven that people wanted to see it through the Kickstarter and stuff like that. So this it's just very rare that this would happen. So I feel like that's kind of reasons why it stands out and why we don't see it a lot more often. It's like it takes a specific voice and it takes maybe not initial studio funding to do it.
I don't know, dude. We're living in an interesting time.
Really.
Really, I don't know. I feel like so it's like if you well, let's bring it back to the customer service aspect. if you work in a place and like you don't like your boss and everybody doesn't like the boss, eventually, I don't know, something has to happen there where you're just gonna have all these like really angry people who don't get their work done. I feel like that's the society we're living in now. Everybody's angry, and I don't know, we're sick of what we're being given, at least media wise and, life wise too. But media wise, like, I feel like there's a lot of like restlessness from at least the people I know and the people I interact with from the media not representing them and who they are specifically. So we're living in a time of great change, aren't we?
Interesting perspective. How do you
Interesting quotes from
how do
Sam.
you relate it to this movie? What you just said.
I don't know, I feel like it's a step, maybe a little bit, if you view it from the mental illness aspect. But if you like, when I was initially viewing it, which I didn't know about like all this stuff, I was like, well, I don't like this movie because it is a white male protagonist who is privileged to an extent, and I can't relate to his problems. Um, so I don't know. Maybe that will like turn a lot of people off from this movie. Maybe it won't. Who knows? But
The problem is, I don't. Yeah, I wonder if that's true. The problem is the only voices who I've heard on this movie are the white male critics, which, um, as pointed out recently by Meryl Streep somewhere, like 70 or like, well, I don't know what it was, like 80% of Rotten Tomatoes critics are male, right? So
let's see if the Mary Sue has anything.
I
Probably
doubt they
not.
wrote this movie, but yeah, like you look at films mentioned on critics most top 10 lists according to Metacritic, and Anomalisa's seventh, uh, like Mad Max, Spotlight, Carol, Inside Out also up there too. Interestingly,
I wish we could talk about Carol.
that's not this movie, but yeah. So yeah, I think certainly gotten a lot of praise from people. I think right now I'm pretty high on it. Like I feel like I don't know. Here's what I do. I look at my it's like right now I have it as my fifth favorite movie of the year, but I look at things around it like Bridge of Spies. Like that's just such a it's an interesting movie about like it's like an interesting drama, but like what is I compare it to the like I don't find any actual meaning in that compared to this movie. It's just all very just it doesn't do anything particularly interesting. I just look at all these films that I've watched and I like them from like filmmaking stuff and like narrative perspectives, but I feel like this one just has more interesting conclusions and makes me like think about like what other movie uses devices like this, like the stop motion, which we didn't even talk about that much, and uses it to such an effect
Yeah, I
where
feel like the stop motion, it's like beautiful, and like I respect that craft. Like I respect that, and I respect all the creative choices that they were making. But narratively, it's just like, mm.
I found it. This is not a movie where I'd specifically look at the narrative, just because of the creative choices relate to the narrative in it's such a innate way that it all kind of blends together towards its overall perspective that it gives the audience. We could yeah. So overall, I just find more meaning in it than most films this year, and I think that's why I like it so much. Let's talk about the stop motion, yeah, to close things out
Maybe
because
because like I'm a big bad artist and like I deal with this stuff all the
I
time.
do, yeah, I do think it would be interesting to see how that perspective.
So to just show it to like my art friends
Yeah,
and be
like
like,
and see how.
"What do you think of this movie?"
Yeah, no, I think that would be really interesting, and I
Oh,
also think it's like you from a female perspective and from a like art perspective too, right? It's like what do you how do non-white males like me react to this movie, right? I think that's also an interesting thing to see.
yeah.
The stop motion, the puppets, they 3D printed. They said they based on character models. They said they specifically wanted them to like not look like puppets. Like they're trying to. His point was like it was like you want a lot of stop motion is like aimed at children and they're like goofy and he wanted people to watch this movie and not think of it as stop motion the entire time, which is what I was hinting at earlier when I was asking you about that. So yeah, I didn't necessarily notice it the entire time, and it's kind of crazy how all of it is just shot by shot from it.
And I was like really like painfully aware of it a lot of the time. Like I don't know, with stop motion, it's like it's a lot of work, and like There are times when I was noticing, like, wow, this must have taken a very long time to do.
Yeah.
But also I don't like the whole the way that the models are set up with sort of like their faces are in sections.
Oh yeah. What do we think of his face dropping off at one point?
That was interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting.
I don't know, the face in sections part though, like to me it just always looked like they were all wearing wireframe glasses.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Like I couldn't tell that they weren't.
I thought that was pretty successful because you see the line in his face the entire time, and then it does eventually drop off. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's because, and it's also very striking because you don't, I don't, at least for me, I didn't think of him as a puppet for I wasn't focusing on that as I was watching.
I mean, I wasn't like this is a puppet pretending to be a man.
Yeah.
I was like, I mean, I gave it like as much agency as like I would a live action film. Like, this is a
How do we think it's? Do you look back on this as like a successful use of stop motion, a particularly meaningful use of it?
yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely in terms of like craft wise, it's pretty groundbreaking. I would say, like, it's like very realistic and frames per second. Like, it seemed a little bit uh more intricate than a lot of other stop motion films that
It's
I'm
very
seeing
seamless. Yeah.
now. Yeah.
What do you? What do we think? So yeah, we like it as a. It's interesting that it was a play first, so it's not like this story was specifically penned for this medium. Um,
Yeah, which makes me feel like, they just did that because they could have. Like, maybe Charlie Kaufman was, like, interested in stop motion.
well, he was. I think in interviews he was like, if I was going to turn this into anything, it would have to be this. He said basically.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, it just seems like, they did it for the hell of it, not because, like, it served, like, any sort of purpose other for, like, his fancy.
I mean, I think that they. I think that I don't know. It wasn't obviously wasn't originally intended for that, maybe specifically, but I think that it does serve a purpose for having it as that medium. I don't know.
Meh.
What do we to close things out? Stop motion as animation. So this is and do what do you think? Is this an animated film? Is this
Yes, it is.
it's what do we what parts of this movie are animated?
Like, what are you talking about?
Well, it's like defining animation, right? This is much different than other
Well, just because,
animation we cover.
yeah, just because it's like animation is just moving images like that are hold on, let's look up the definition for animation. But
I think it does meet the definition. I agree.
while we're looking up
Well,
definition.
it's like the difference is this was made on a studio set with like 18 different sets where they place the puppet and they move it, they take picture, they place the puppet, they move it, take picture.
So
As
are you
opposed to
like
like
questioning the like
not
well
like
it's no different from just drawing things in a cell, really.
well why yeah, well, how is that the same? Like that's my I'm not skeptical. I'm just trying
You're
to
taking like a static, either an inanimate object or a static image, and you're moving it slightly to create the illusion or like the effect of motion.
what
So,
what manifestations come from it being a object versus a drawing?
hmm? Like, what do you mean by that?
It's like it's like a draw. This is like a printed object that's being moved as opposed to a thing that someone drew. I feel like there's a lot of things that would differences that would result from that.
I mean, it's like, I mean, technically, I mean, obviously, there's differences between puppeteering and animate, like physically drawing, being an animator, but it's still like they're like sisters. They come from the same overarching parent of animation, but then there's visual animation or 2D animation, 3D animation too, I guess, and then stop motion. And it's like, again, I was just saying, like, they may have different ways of going about it. Okay, it's sort of like in sculpture, how you have different mediums. Like, you could be working in wood and make all these like wood carvings and do all of that stuff, but you can also be working in like candy or like chicken wire or like gum wrappers and stuff. Like, you can maybe be making things, but you're still under the moniker of sculpture. It's still the basis is like a 3D object. So it still has the basis of being, you know, static things that are being manipulated by somebody's hand to move slightly frame by frame, you know?
Why is this considered the broad category for this designation? The thing being moved frame by frame,
As opposed to being considered like a sculpture or
as
like
opposed to literally anything else. Like, why is it that this is the category that we define it by?
you're you're the one who took linguistics classes. Tell me
Well,
how
this
to.
is an art question. I'm not qualified to answer this. That's why I'm asking
I
you.
haven't taken very many animation classes in my day.
Yeah,
I don't know about like the theory about it and all, but it's just the medium that
yeah,
it is.
I'm not trying to express skepticism. I think these are questions worth asking that I feel like we take for granted sometimes. That's why I'm asking them. Um,
Like why it's like opposed to like why this.
why is this the same as the other things we cover? Why is anything the same as anything else? Like, I don't know.
Wow, okay, that's getting to like a like an existential viewing that like maybe we can't really answer.
Well, okay, let's talk about it compared briefly. Let's wrap things up. Compared to like live action, um, what does this film do that live action can't, or maybe they both can, and how more traditional animation can do it too?
So live action captures a moment, like a human moment that
Hmm.
happens. Um, Animation sort of captures the like an imaginary moment, like something that is like I don't know, something more man-made than like organic human motion. You know what I mean?
One of my biggest differences when I think of this is that animation has like no limitations, whereas
Yeah,
live
yeah.
action a lot of times
I
does.
definitely think about that too.
But
Yeah.
here's the thing: does stop motion for sure has limitations? I feel like that are not placed on different types of animation.
Yeah, because it has to do with maybe it has to do with the skills of like the people behind it. It has to do with like it's props. It's sculpture basically. It's moving sculpture,
Hmm.
and it costs money. Like it costs more to make a whole like giant dragon out of a puppet parts than it would to draw a giant dragon. Like maybe more labor too. So it has to do a lot with like the limitations of budget and skill too. Like there's like maybe not that many people out there like who are in the film world who can make giant dragons, but there are certainly like a lot of people who can draw giant dragons and they can draw them successively frame by frame. So
Yeah, I'm really interested in like the difference in how these different mediums like manifest narrative and limitations surrounding narrative, and how they may be better or less equipped for dealing with certain types of narrative. And in my mind, this, if you're looking at it from that perspective, this is very much different than like computer animation or hand drawn animation. And both of these are very much also different from live action. And I'm not sure specifically how the relation to narrative is for all of them. And I think it's really interesting that this manifested from the stop motion.
it's sort of just like looking at it's the same thing with art. Like you have an idea and you think, well, how do I want to manifest this in a medium? Like, do I want to make this a painting? Do I want to make
Mm,
this a sculpture?
mm.
It's the same thing. Like you look at a narrative, you look at a script, and maybe like not all directors think this, or not all like studios think this, but there has to be a question maybe sometimes like, how do I want to manifest this?
Yeah,
Do I
see,
want to make it live action? Do I want to make it animation? Like,
yeah,
but then again, like there's sometimes where like it's specifically written to be a certain kind.
and I think people never ask that question in modern film, and I think it's a big limitation that we're imposing on our stories. I think animation is not being explored to the depths that it could be because people don't consider it a serious choice for serious narratives. They just default to live action, whereas we might be able to explore like really different types of more intricate, more abstract types of narratives through animation.
Yeah, maybe this will be a helpful
And I hope this pushes us
thing.
towards adult films being considering animation for their to execute their narratives. And even if it's children oriented, that's not really the distinguisher to me. It's just like it shouldn't just be like these two animation studios that make films. So like in Japan, some of the biggest movies of the year are animated. and they're a lot of times aimed at adults, and their comic books can be aimed at adults, their animes can be aimed at adults, right? We don't have this limitation that we impose on animation here in America. Not that Japan is the pinnacle of like non-societal impositions, but in this instance, I feel like, explore this medium in ways that we do not here.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe we should do a series on adult oriented and like not like quote unquote adult, like sexual or whatever, but more like seeing like what animation can do if it's not just in the mindset, well, kids love animation, blah blah blah
Yeah,
blah
no,
blah.
and I mean that's why I like think Pixar a lot of times gets into with especially with some of their better films, gets into that, and a lot of the Ghibli films we cover definitely get into that.
So
Like it's
maybe we should start talking about that more.
yeah, the more conceptual stuff, more different types of films, stuff like that. Cool.
I can definitely come up with some films and stuff that have that.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, we could do that.
I'll make a list.
Yes, make a list on that. Cool. Okay.
Dylan loves lists.
Last thoughts on Anomalisa. We already kind of wrapped it up before we
Yeah.
got into this hypothetical discussion, but
I mean, I guess objectively, like I can see why like it's getting all the hype right now. Subjectively, I didn't think it was like too much to sneeze at, but there's yeah.
it's like getting hype, but also at the same time, it's not like this has any chance of getting a Best Picture nomination. Like it's
Yeah.
generic, the generic.
Yeah, the generic, like kind of how like Carol is like the generic drama.
Yeah, it's not breaking into that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. If you have seen this movie and you listen to this podcast, which I'm not convinced that we're going to get very high ratings for this one, but let me know what you thought of it and what you think of, especially because our audience falls on more of the progressive spectrum and how that colored your perspective of watching this film. Cool. Cool.
Yep. Cool.
All right. I'm Del Nice and that's Sam Quattro. You can find more about this podcast at overlyanimated.com. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to our current patrons: Shayna, Mitch, Cordell, Beatrice, Nate, Andy, Jamie, and Rachel, aka Hey Nephew, Mitch, Cordell, University, Beatrix Strange, Buzz Like Your Mailman, and Rachel Rose.
She like just messaged you saying
Yeah,
yes.
so we have an answer. So we've covered. I want to cover all the Best Picture and Best Animated Feature contenders. It's going to be this. It's going to be Inside Out. Hopefully, I do Good Dinosaur with Mel at some point, and then we'll see what the others are. If Minions is, then we covered that one. So,
Do you want to like do just like a whole podcast on like the shorts?
yeah,
Whenever
if I can find the shorts, yeah. I don't.
I
know
mean,
if I'll
they
be able to
usually
find that,
they
though.
maybe they play in theaters like around
Well,
Oscar time anyway.
if we can both see the shorts, then yeah, then definitely I'll do that. Okay. Thanks for listening, guys. We will see you next time. Bye.
I